this way? How high up do you want to go? Or even this way?
Let's try that way first. Hello, everybody. Welcome. We had a few technical difficulties, so we are just getting everything set up. I think that works. I think that looks good. Yeah.
Hey.
Do you want to?
Hi. That does look good. Maybe we could, yeah, okay. And you can get all the plants into the
Excellent. Okay. Yep. Yeah, I think I'm all good.
So I'm gonna go do a sound check on my computer to make sure the audio is working. You want to get
started,
and I'll be right back.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Hello, all of my friends. Welcome. My name is Emily Hall, coming to you from Glover Nursery. Today we're talking about pollinators and pollinator gardens. It's one of my favorite topics ever. So a little bit about me. I have a couple horticulture degrees, and then I was actually a beekeeper for a good couple years. So really all about pollinators and how to support them in our landscapes and how to think about them a little bit more. So if you have any questions at all, just drop them into the chat. I will check it periodically and get to them just as soon as I can. So let me grab my notes and we're gonna get going. So today we're talking about the root of what we're talking about is pollination. So what is pollination? Why is that so important? Why do we talk about it all the time? Pollination is that transfer from pollen from one flower to the other. And that is how we get actual fruit production, seed production. It's just bringing it from one to another. There are lots of different ways that plants can be pollinated. There's wind, water, all that sort of stuff. And then the main way for most of our edible plants or wild plants is going to be through a pollinator. And that can look like a lot of different stuff more than just the bees or even honeybees that we think about. So there's a lot out there. So it's really important to kind of think about them as you kind of go throughout that journey of talking about doing a pollinator garden. So that's why we want to talk about why they're so important in our ecosystem, because about 75% of the flowering plants rely on those pollinators to pollinate their flowers. And even there's some pollinators out there that may not have that readily apparent economic value, of like, we need the honeybees to go pollinate the almond trees for the almond production. That there's a lot of other pollinators out there that do work that we may not see immediately and we may not be using for like a commercial benefit, but that does not mean that they are not important and that we shouldn't think about them. They all have an indirect value that if you dive in a little bit, you can find. And so over 30% of like our production crops, like apples, almonds, like I mentioned, tomatoes, a whole bunch of other stuff in the garden, they really do depend on that pollination in order to produce the fruit or the seeds or whatever is the end product that we are needing. And they, of course, they contribute to biodiversity and all of our food webs. They do a lot more in our garden besides just pollinate. A lot of them are also considered beneficial insects, which means that they can help go after other pests in the garden. So they have, there's a lot of other really good reasons to have them in your garden besides just pollinating your tomato plants. So why do we talk about them so much, and why is there's a lot out there of providing for them and providing pollinator gardens? And one of the main reasons is because their populations have really experienced those drastic declines in some of the recent years, and that is just due to a lot of different reasons. There is, of course, loss of habitat, changing climate, different weather patterns, diseases, pesticide use. There's a lot of different factors that go into that. But so it's kind of all of that together has made it not the best for our pollinators. So the question is, what can we do in our gardens to help protect those species and help to boost their populations? And a lot of that can be, the biggest, most important thing is providing biodiversity and habitat in your garden. Habitat loss doesn't just happen somewhere else. It happens in our suburbs, where our businesses are. It really happens everywhere. So if we can do a little bit in our own backyard to kind of help them, then that is one of the best things that we can do. And with that is also the other big thing that is really important to think about is having staggering bloom times, trying to have something blooming all throughout the growing season. So that is definitely something we're going to be talking about today. How can you kind of tackle that challenge in providing like a food source or habitat throughout the whole season from one to another? And then another big thing is to maybe practice IPM, and then also understanding that native plantings are going to provide some of those best habitats for our native pollinators. And then with IPM, if you're not familiar with it, it stands for Integrated Pest Management. So there's a pyramid of IPM, of kind of the steps in order that you go through before maybe jumping straight into a chemical. So it first starts with prevention. Is there things that we can do right off the bat to kind of help mitigate some of these issues before they even start? The next layer on top of that is cultural. Is there things in our garden? Is there a way we can set things up in order to help prevent that? One of those, just an example of that would be increasing your airflow between your plants. So maybe you prune a little more, maybe something isn't as densely planted, and by improving airflow, you can help prevent and kind of help ease some powdery mildew issues. So that's just an example of what cultural means. The next layer on top of that is physical. So if that was something with a pest, you can physically remove that pest. A good example is that tomato hornworm. They do turn into a moth. I think they're kind of cool. So one of the treatments you could use on them before going to a chemical would be can you just physically remove them off of your tomato plants and maybe move them onto another plant that is okay for them to eat. And then the next one on top of physical is biological. So that is using all of the other like beneficials in your area to kind of help combat that, maybe in a more natural, like ecosystem kind of way, using their natural predators for those pests that you have to try to curb their population. And then the last thing is chemical. So it's like if you have gone through all of these steps, you've tried figuring out ways to prevent, you've tried improving it, you've tried moving them, you've tried to use beneficials, you've tried to encourage them, and you're still just having these issues, maybe then we start looking at a chemical solution. But the main idea behind IPM is just trying to go through some other steps before jumping to chemicals. And that is very beneficial to our pollinators so that they don't come in the crosshairs of those chemicals by accident. And just by doing some of those things, it can really help their populations in our backyards, in all of our areas. Okay, so I want to talk about what our common pollinators are in Utah, and maybe a little info about them, and kind of understanding some tools that if you're trying to encourage those pollinators, certain aspects about plants to look for when you're trying to plant for them. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is native bees. So this is more than just honeybees. A lot of the native bees that we have, there's mason bees, bumblebees, sweat bees, leafcutter bees, wool carder, large carpenter, mining, digging. Like there are so many bees that we have in Utah. There's actually about 1,100 species of bees that are native to Utah. 90% of those bees are solitary. So that means they don't have a hive like honeybees do. They're more solitary, just the queen overwinters. They all make their own little nest. And then 70% of them, they make their nests in the ground actually. They're not up in a tree, they're in the ground, they're in the leaves or in stalks of plants, and that's where they live, that's where they overwinter and where they emerge in spring. And then there's 20 to 40% are specialist species, and those require native plant pollen. So kind of what that means, there's kind of two different categories of bees or pollinators. You have your specialists and your generalists. Your generalists, just like it sounds, they will visit a wide variety of plants. They'll pollinate a lot of different stuff, and just they're good with anything. But those specialists, they have a lot, in most cases, they have co-evolved with a specific plant or plant family or something like that. And they've co-evolved to need each other. So that plant needs that specific pollinator to pollinate it, and then that pollinator needs that pollen from that one plant or the nectar, and they need each other. So if you want to support those pollinators, it needs to be that native plant. And so southern Utah also has more species of native bees than the entire East Coast, which is crazy to think about. So there are so many native bee species in Utah. So there's a lot that we really can do to kind of help support them. The thing that is, yes, yeah, that's why I think it's one of the reasons we're called the beehive state. Yeah, you're right. So there's some interesting things that you can do, some different strategies or tools to use when you're thinking about flowers for bees. They really like yellow, blue, purple. And if you look at those plants under UV light, like these certain plants, they light up. It's really interesting. And you can almost see like landing strips guiding them into the center of the plants and leading them to where that pollen is. So kind of an example is going to be this bright blue flax. So it's that really nice blue color. And I know it may be a little hard to see on the camera, but you kind of can see those lines of different colors that lead down into the middle. So if we were to put this under UV, I bet you it would light up like a landing strip. So I think that's really interesting. Another thing that the bees like are packed clusters of flowers, because bees have their short tongues. So they kind of really like it when you've got these packed flower clusters. So they can land on this, and then they can go to all these tiny little flowers really easily. So this is a yarrow. Yarrows are really great for a lot of different pollinators. So you can kind of see here, it's really a lot of tiny little flowers. So those are kind of some of the things that bees really look for in a flower when they want to go pollinate. So we had a question in here. Is there a difference between pollinators and beneficials as far as insects go? I would say yes, in some cases. I feel like a lot of the times it can be like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle isn't a square, if that makes sense. There's an overlap, but some things are more considered just a beneficial. So like a wasp is a pollinator. They're actually a really, really great generalist. They're really great at, just going to a wide variety of plants. But the other thing about them and what would consider them a beneficial is they will go after some of the pests in your garden as well. So that would be something that would be both, but I feel like so lacewings is something that is a really popular beneficial, and I am not really sure if you would consider them a pollinator. So kind of same like with ladybugs. We think of ladybugs as also a really good beneficial, and we're really looking for the ladybug larvae as that beneficial to really go after aphids. And in that stage, they're not, they wouldn't really be doing any pollinating as their main job per se. So in that case, I would probably say it put them in the category of more of a beneficial than a pollinator. But yeah, sometimes they definitely can cross over in those categories in what they're doing in your garden. So yeah, there's like I said, and then just to kind of wrap that up about the bees, they like those blues, yellows, densely packed flower clusters, and so just some examples of what they like. They really like herbs, marigold, butterfly weed. All of those things are really good examples of what the bees like. All right, so we're going to move on to butterflies. Let's talk about butterflies. So some of the species that are native in Utah, we've got the monarchs and swallowtails. And the thing about them, of what they like when you're looking at flowers for them, is they like red, orange, yellow, pink, and they really do look for stuff that's got a landing zone and like in a sunny location. They also really like tubular flower shapes, because if you think of how they have a longer tongue. So here we go. Echinacea is a really good plant for the butterflies because they've got these nice little landing zones for them to land on. And then it's kind of deep in there so they can get their tongue all the way down in. And it's always got those bright, really bright, pretty colors. So echinacea is a really good one. And then we've also got, so this is a half pint pine leaf penstemon. But just it's like that one of those red penstemons, and you can see they've got those long tubular flowers. So it's really nice for them to get their tongue all the way down, and it's those really bright colors of the red on the outside. There's some really nice orange in the inside, if you can kind of see that. So those are some of the indicators of a plant that you could look for if you are trying to support those butterflies. Now, the other big thing to address with butterflies is going to be milkweed. The thing that is most important about the milkweed is it's really important for reproduction for the larvae, because they eat these leaves. The other thing to think about when you're wanting to support pollinators, particularly like those butterflies and those moths, is we need to provide habitat for the larvae to be laid on and to eat, to grow up into those butterflies. So we need to be okay with seeing these get nibbled. And if you're seeing it get nibbled, then it's doing its job. So this is the milkweed. As you can see, I mean, those flowers are gorgeous. Just lots of those really nice bright orange ones, and then lots of the leafy greens for the larvae and the caterpillars to munch on, and then they turn into our beautiful butterflies. So these are the milkweed is very important for the reproduction, and that's what you would want to really think about if you want to get more butterflies in your yard, is how to support them during the reproduction. Now, some other examples for butterflies, like they like asters, lupine, thistle, hollyhock, black-eyed Susans. Those are all really great for the butterflies. Okay, the next one I'm going to talk about is moths. Pretty similar to butterflies, but they are a little different. We have the sphinx moth in Utah. They typically they like more of the light color flowers that are going to open more at dusk and evening. So they really like primrose, datura, nicotiana, a lot of nightshades. And I think it's interesting. They really like, it's been described as that sweet formaldehyde scent. So I think that's a really lovely description, but they really do like more of those kind of like nighttime blooming, evening blooming. I mean, that's kind of when they come out more and are ready to feed. So that's kind of some good things for them. All right, now I'm going to talk about hummingbirds. So what we have in Utah, it's the black-chinned hummingbird. And they're pretty similar in what types of flowers they like. They're kind of similar to butterflies. The difference is they don't necessarily need to have that landing area like the butterflies really do. But it doesn't hurt to have some landing areas for them. So really similar. They like that red, orange, purple, and again, those really tubular flowers. So I'm gonna, so this is columbine. I think these flower shapes are just so fun. So it goes all the way back like that with those tubes, and they just come in so many really fun colors. And you can see, I mean, it's similar with what we were talking about with bees, where those colors are really going to help guide them in. And these are really great for the hummingbirds to like hover, get down in those little tubes, get the nectar, and they're, yeah, really, really great for butterflies. And again, really similar. I mean, we talked about the penstemon with the butterflies. So again, it's just that tubular shape and that color is what we're looking at. So that's something that you can think about if you are wanting to have more hummingbirds in your area. Okay, the next ones I have are, I think they're really fun. You don't think about them as much, but there is still things we can do to support them, and they really are still pollinators. So first one I want to talk about is beetles. What we have in Utah is the soldier beetle. That's a native, and for the beetles, their like flower shape is like a wide open flower. So like roses, sunflowers, and the interesting thing about the beetles is they're actually more there to eat the pollen, and they kind of pollinate as an accident. So because they're going to those flowers to kind of eat some of the pollen, but inevitably that's going to get on them. They'll move to the next flower, and of course someone's going to brush off, and then we're going to have some pollination happening. So I think that's really fun. I think the beetles are fun. The next one is flies, which you may not think about as pollinators, but they are. In Utah, we've got syrphid flies and hover flies. They're all very generalist. They really like green, white, cream flowers, and they have short tongues. So they really like a simple bowl shape. Something that is really interesting, and if you didn't know this and you really like figs, I hope this doesn't deter you. But most figs, there are some figs that are self-fertile, like Desert King is an example of one that's self-fertile. But for most of the figs, they are pollinated by a fly. And that fly, when it pollinates, doesn't actually leave the fig. It goes into the flower and it dies. And then the flower uses the energy from the fly to then create the fig. So it's in there when you're eating some of those other figs. So I think it's really interesting. And you just, yeah, a fly, you're kind of eating a fly, but it's different, right? It's been processed, it's using it in different ways. But yeah, flies are still important. Okay, we've got a couple more. I just think that's a really fun story. Uh, like I said, figs are still good. Don't let that deter you from the figs. And it's not all figs. Um, Typically, even I think it's more of like the southern regions of where those flies even are and where those figs grow. But I think it's a super fun fact about figs. Okay, I want to talk about ants for a little bit. They're not as super common as a pollinator, but they definitely still are. They have a lot of, I mean, ants have a lot of different roles in the garden, really. And so what they pollinate, that's going to be really low growing, really inconspicuous flowers that are going to be really close to the stem. So an example would kind of be like wild ginger. Um, and yeah, they're not the most prevalent for pollinators, but I definitely still want to mention them for sure. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about is bats. So bats are a pollinator, maybe not in our specific ecoregion in Utah, but they're typically found more in the Southwest. But they really like light color, night blooming flowers with a strong odor. So that's a lot of the different cacti. So, but yeah, bats are a pollinator. And if you are in an area where you can kind of support some of their habitat that they like, then that's kind of what they're going to look for. And I think it's really great. So I think that's super fun. Those are a lot of the main pollinators that that we have in Utah that I wanted to talk about. So I am going to move on to my next topic, which I want to talk about is creating a bee friendly or pollinator friendly space. There is a couple different things you can do besides just planting flowers to support our bees and our pollinators. So one of the main things we can do is to leave bare patches in the soil for those ground nesting bees. Like I mentioned before, a good amount of our native bees are solitary and are ground nesting. So they need those places that are going to be undisturbed in order to actually be able to nest and successfully overwinter and reemerge to make more bees that season. So by leaving those undisturbed spaces of soil and just leaving them alone, just doing simple things like that is really going to help support them and give them that place in order to make their nests. Another thing you can do is provide water for the bees and the butterflies to drink. The way you want to do that is by using like a shallow dish. I've used like a plant saucer before because it's pretty shallow. Use a shallow dish, and you really want to fill that with rocks, and like you can use rocks or marbles, and also you can provide like little islands, and if it has like a sloped side on the edge, that's really great. So that way they can get in and out easier, and then it gives them a place to land to then drink, because if they just land right in the water, that is not going to be good. They can't get out. And so what we want to do is provide the water, but give them some places to stand so that they can actually get to that water and drink it. Okay, one moment. I'm going to look at this. We've got a question. Hi, Houston Rose Gardner. Hello. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, the question for the pollinators that nest in the stems, is it okay to clean them up so we don't accidentally kill them during hibernation? That is a really good point. I want to talk about that as well. I feel like we've all heard like leave the leaves. Don't clean up your garden yet. And that is the reason why. So in fall and winter, those bees, it's the queens, they're the ones that overwinter. They are going to find a place where they can make their nest and hunker down until they reemerge next spring. A lot of those places in the dead stalks of perennials. It's going to be in leaves, in Like if you have ornamental grasses, those are a lot of the places that they'll go. And what we want to do is not disturb them. Because if you do like a really big cleanup in the fall, there isn't that habitat for them to be in the first place. They're not going to go there. There's nowhere for them to be. So why would they overwinter there? Then the next thing is in springtime. I know I feel like once the sun hits and it's like 40 degrees, I know we all want to get out and start doing stuff in our garden, and that includes cleaning that up, getting rid of some of the dead stuff. But the thing with that is those bees that are overwintering, they are still in there. They haven't emerged yet. It's still too cold for them to emerge and come out. So if you clean up too early, then you're probably just going to kill them. And that's not what we want to do. So the best thing is to leave your leaves or your thatch. It's really nice to like rake them into your garden beds and just leave them there over the winter. And then in spring, when it comes time to clean up, just wait. I know it can be a little hard, but the best thing to do is wait. And most perennials and grasses and everything like that, they are all actually going to do much better in the springtime for a cleanup than in fall. And a good sign that you can look for that it's okay to kind of start your cleanup is, are you starting to get new growth at the base? That can also be a really good thing to wait for to do your prune, so that you're not removing some of that protection that the plant has, because those dead leaves, those dead stalks, they are actually still providing some insulation for that plant and that root ball. And so by taking that all of that away too soon, and if it starts to get cold again, that could potentially shock that plant, do some damage to that root ball, and it may not grow back as strong as it has or could have. So really the best thing to do is just leave it all there. And then really when you start seeing that new growth at the base, that is a sign that the plant's waking up. It's ready to push new growth. It's ready for that plant material to be out of the way. And then that's pretty indicative that the bees and moths and butterflies and all of the overwintering insects have also woken up. They have emerged. They have gone elsewhere. They're starting their new life. So then it's okay to go ahead and really start your cleanup. And that is one of the best things that you can do for those ground nesting bees, is just giving them the habitat, leaving them alone, letting them overwinter, and cleaning up after they have emerged. And then the next thing I want to talk about when we're thinking about creating that good space for our pollinators is you really want to plant clusters of the same flowers together. So if you are going to do like a yarrow, I would plant like 3 yarrows together. You could do, I think it'd be fun to do different colors, have some different looks going on there. But by planting them together, that is going to be able to attract more of the pollinators. It's a bigger landing area. It's a bigger spot for them to see. I mean, if you're up high, think about you're up high in the air. If there's just one little thing, that's maybe going to be a little harder to see. But now if we've got 3 of those little things together, that's a much bigger area for you to see, and then go find it, go look at it, go check it out, go see what it is. So that's a really nice thing you can do as well. If you're to do like 2 to 3 of the same plants, do them together. I think they look really nice together, because then you've got more of it. It grows really nice together in kind of that bunch. And then it's a bigger visual for those pollinators to attract them in, and gives them just much more of that space to kind of land if they need to and get that nectar, get that pollen. Okay, that's what I've got about just some things to think about that you could do in your area to just make it more pollinator friendly. Now I'm going to talk more. Now I'm going to start diving into, if you want to say at the beginning and you're trying to design your pollinator garden. One of the biggest things I want you to think about if you are really wanting that pollinator garden is we really need those staggered bloom times, because you want to be providing that nectar and that pollen all season long. And with most things, it's like they're a really early spring bloomer and then they kind of stop. So if you have those gaps in the seasons where there's not a plant that is going to be providing that nutrition, then I mean, why would they come there? There's not really much support happening. So I want to give a couple examples of of things you could choose that are that staggered bloom time. Now, again, these are just a few of many that you could really pick, but I want to talk about them and how you could use something similar like this to kind of achieve that staggered bloom time. I feel like the hardest things to plan for, I feel like it's kind of what we forget about, is that really early spring and then the really late fall. I feel like middle of the season, there's a lot of things blooming. So I feel like that is really easily taken care of. But I feel like sometimes we can kind of forget about the beginning and the end. And those are still some really important times to provide those flowers for the pollinators. The mason bees they're one of the earliest bees to emerge, and they are one of the biggest pollinators of fruit trees. Fruit trees are one of the earliest bloomers, and I mean, to get the fruit, you need the pollinators. So there is kind of that symbiotic relationship with fruit trees and mason bees. And so that's kind of something to think about if you want to have something early blooming to support them, then you can use fruit trees, or vice versa. Do you have fruit trees that you would like maybe some help pollinating? Then I would probably think about how can you support the mason bees in your area. And there's something I'll talk about later with that. But another one I want to bring up is this golden currant. This is a native. And again, it's going to also be really important to provide that diversity of native plants and maybe just some naturalized or common, and then in that staggered bloom time. So the golden currant is a really nice, really early bloomer that is going to be a native. And some of the others I've shown are going to be some of those early bloomers. I just want to touch on them again. So columbine is a great early to mid-season bloomer. This is Amsonia. It's got those really great blue flower clusters, really good early season. And then another one I want to talk about is this buckwheat. This is also another really great early season. I love those flower shapes, those really tight clusters, lots of flowers in there. Okay, and then kind of moving into more of those mid-seasons, as you can see, we've got the penstemon that's kind of starting to bloom now and will continue on through summer. We saw our milkweed was just starting to bloom. Also, our echinacea is just starting to bloom. And again, what's really nice about all of these ones is they're going to keep blooming throughout the whole summer. And they're just going to keep producing, keep flowering. Another really, really great one is going to be Nepeta catmint. This is in the mint family, it's Lamiaceae. And anything that's going to be in this mint family is just really great for pollinators. That's all of our herbs, obviously mint, and they're just really great. Lavender is in that family as well. So you can see they're all really similar they've got these really nice blue flowers. A really interesting thing about this family and how you can tell that it's in the mint family is they've got these square stems. So if you try to roll it, you'll notice that there's sides on the stems. Really aromatic, really, really great for the pollinators. Okay, now I feel like we're pretty familiar. Echinacea is pretty popular. You know, that's a really good bloomer throughout the whole season. And now I'm going to move on to some of those end season ones. So this is going to be the gold. This is particularly baby gold goldenrod. As you can see right now, it's not really doing a lot because it's going to be more of that later bloomer. Some other ones I want to bring up. So this is rabbit brush. This is particularly the rubber rabbit brush. Really great late season bloomer. And this is also a native plant. So we're trying to mix in those natives and the more common ones. This one is a native as well. Again, this one doesn't look like it's doing much now. It is pretty small right now, but this will get really big. This is the wild 4 o'clock, and it'll get like up to like 3 feet wide. Really great late bloomer. This is a really good one to kind of help support in that time where a lot of things kind of start dying back down. Okay, the last one I'm going to bring up, this is a hyssop, sunset hyssop. This will kind of start mid-season as well, but this is another one. It'll keep going until we hit a frost. So this one's a really good one as well, and it'll get pretty big too. So it'll start blowing up. All right, and then like I've talked about with some of these plants, it's really important to use those native wildflowers and shrubs for food sources. Something I want to touch on is using natives for other things than just the nectar. There are other species of plants that are really important to our ecosystem and all of our regions, not necessarily because of their flowers. So one thing I really love, this is a gamble oak or a scrub oak. This is native to our region, and this is what is called a keystone species. So it supports, I can't even remember how many caterpillars and larval stages, but this supports so many species of pollinators and beneficials. That's right. To be a keystone, it's like at least 100 species that it supports. The gamble oaks are great. Like I said, they're native. I think they're really pretty. Just really, this is something that's going to be really important to have in your garden. And like I said, when you see things start to nibble on it, that is a good thing. That means it's there doing its job. It's supporting the ecosystem as a whole. It's a part of your garden. So the gamble oak is a really important one. Okay, another one I want to talk about is willow. This is a coyote willow. So this one is native to our region. And again, this is something that is going to provide some more of those food sources for like larval stages, caterpillars, throughout the whole season. So we're not necessarily planting this for the flowers. We are planting this for its leaves and for its habitat and how it can really help support those other aspects of the ecosystem that maybe flowers itself aren't necessarily getting to. Okay, last one I want to talk about. This is the blue-beaked yucca. So again, it can also be really important to use a diversity of plants, not just flowers. Grasses, yuccas, anything like that, shrubs, trees, they are going to do some of those other things like we talked about, of providing that habitat, providing that shelter and that space for those pollinators. So this one is a really good example of something that we're not necessarily getting for the flower, we're getting it for other reasons. And this will really help round out your ecosystem, your garden, to really be a good space for our pollinators. Okay. All right. Some other things to consider when you're thinking about designing your garden is, I mean, we talked about providing shelter. So something I want to talk about is bug hotels, if you've heard about them. They're normally little houses of varying shapes. You can make your own. But what is interesting about them is you're providing different sizes and shapes of shelter for various insects. You can get ones that are really general, or you can make ones that are really general. That is just, I've seen ones, different sizes of bamboo, or just rocks and sticks in areas. And it's just a place that you build where it's just safe for them to go, that you're not really going to disturb. Something that is, I guess it would technically be considered a bug hotel, but I wanted to bring up the mason bees again. So mason bees are solitary. They don't have a hive, but you can have a mason bee house. It's, I mean, it's really similar to like a bug hotel, but there are some different specifications that you have with the mason bees. Something that happens with the mason bees when they make their nests in the wild is there is a lot of diseases that they come in contact with. And if they unfortunately come in contact with some of those diseases, as the queen, as she's making her nest, so it's not really a nest. How they lay their eggs is it'll be in like a tube. So if you picture there's like a tube right here, she'll come to the back, make a little mud stop, lays the egg. There's a little bit of food there, makes another mud stop, lays another egg, makes a mud stop. So in like a stalk, you can have multiple sets of the bees. And as they emerge, they have to crawl through all of that mud and all of that. And if the mason bee was in contact with some of the diseases, it's going to be in that material, or like chemicals. It's going to be in that material as they emerge and walk out of the stalk. So then they just get infected or diseased just right off the bat. So what a solution that a lot of people have used is making a mason bee house. So it's just a little house that has, you can do like bamboo stalks. There's specific blocks that are made for it, and the mason bee will go in and lay her eggs, and you want to leave it there until like the dead of winter. Then you can actually open it up, scrape out all of the cocoons of the mason bees, and you actually want to do a little cleanup of them. I have used like a really diluted solution of bleach to just like kind of quickly rinse them, so that we kind of eliminate all those diseases, all those chemicals. And then you put them in a little container that's close to that house. You put it back outside, and then they will emerge when they're ready. And the interesting thing about doing a mason bee house like that is they go back to lay their eggs pretty close to where they emerge. That's where, it's what they know. So it's a way to, so when you have your mason bees and you have them emerge next to your mason bee house, then they're gonna keep coming back and laying in your mason bee house. And then you just have this nice little cycle of supporting those mason bees, getting that good pollination of your fruit trees early in the season. And personally, I think it's a little fun. It's really fun to like hold the little cocoons. You do want to be careful when you're cleaning them, that you're maybe not inside for too long, or if you could be in a garage, just because if it does get too warm, they will think it's time to wake up. So they will emerge from their cocoons. And it can be a little sad if it's still a little cold, but sometimes you can feel them vibrating in their cocoons, which is really fun. So that's just a little side note into a very specific bug hotel. But that's just an example of some different types of things you can do for bug hotels to really provide that nesting area. And then something we talked about with IPM is, again, avoid those pesticides as much as you can. Go through other measures until you have to get to a chemical use of that. And then if you feel like that's what you have to do, then I would just be really careful. read your labels. Sometimes you can find more pollinator friendly if you go on the more organic side, or sometimes once the chemical dries, it's not it's not dangerous to the pollinators anymore. So sometimes what you can do as well is maybe you go and spray really early in the morning before those pollinators have woken up, to try to give it time to dry down before most of them are out. So there are some of those tactics you can use if you feel like you have to do that. But if you feel like you're kind of to that point, or maybe you don't know, you can always come in and talk to us at our diagnostics table. We can help walk you through those steps, try to help come up with some other solutions to try first, in order to, kind of help mitigate your situation. And we can really help you work through that to find what is the best option for you. If it's something you're kind of struggling with, you're not really sure what to do, our diagnostics team is really great about helping you find solutions to some of those problems if it kind of is getting to that point. All right, and then something we have talked about this a lot, but the biggest thing is going to be that diversity of color, diversity of flower shape. Plant them in groups and clusters for better visibility. The more diversity of shapes, flower flower type, color, bloom time, all of that, the better, the more support you're providing for those pollinators, the more likely they're going to be in your yard utilizing that. And then you get to look at them more, which I think is kind of our reward. It's our little reward. And then, like I kind of talked about with some of like the yucca, those native grasses or bunch grasses are really great to kind of help provide some of that habitat. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about just maybe some different planting tips. I feel like this is a lot of, just kind of in general when you're planting a new part of your garden. We always want to think about your soil, think about how you can prepare your soil. A big part of that is maybe knowing a little bit more about your soil before you start. You could do a soil test, learn more about your texture, and then if you can go from there of what kind of amendments you need to add. If you are using a lot of natives, the nice thing is they grow here, so they're used to our soil. So that is another really great reason to use some natives, is they can acclimate to our soils a lot easier than some of the other ones that can be a little hard to kind of break into that. We always want to make sure we're providing some good irrigation, especially through the hottest part of the season. The why that is really important is because it can help avoid or prevent having what is called a nectar dearth in those high summer temperatures. A dearth it's just like a time of nothing, essentially. So what that means is during those hot summer days, the flowers kind of go into just a little bit like defensive mode. It's very hot, water is limited, so they are going to be producing less nectar, less pollen to conserve some of their energy. So in areas that have more irrigation throughout those times, they don't have to go through that as much. So it can really help still provide that nectar in times where not a lot of other plants may have some. So watering is going to be really big part of it. A lot of the natives, once established, they can be a little bit more on that drought tolerant side. So that is something that's also really nice as well. I'd also just keep in mind when you are planting that it can be nice to kind of plant things that have similar watering needs together. So you're not trying to water one but not get the other one. You can kind of water this area similarly and water this area, how it needs it. It's a little easier if they have completely different watering levels that they need. And then the other thing is going to be full sun, as much full sun as you can. Things are going to bloom a lot better when they are in that full sun. And then just much more for production, especially for fruit or seeds, if that is what we're after with that pollination. If you are trying to get something out of there, those are some really good things to keep in mind when you're actually planting and growing, and kind of how to keep track of that. Okay, I'm going to check in with our chat real quick. Okay, there was one here a couple minutes ago. What can I plant to keep cats out of my garden from doing their business? That is a good question. I don't really know off the top of my head.
We can research it.
Yeah, we'll have to research. What we'll do is we're going to research that. I'm going to go talk to my diagnostics manager. I bet you will know. And yeah, I'll see if I can find something out. I would maybe say don't plant catnip mint or catnip, because they do like it. So this is just a reminder. This was our cat mint. This is Nepeta, and they really do like it. So maybe you could avoid some of those things to plant. But yeah, I wonder if there is something that would kind of help kind of deter them. That's a really good question. Oh, that's right. So there is an herb called cat and dog away. Yeah. It is in the mint family. I know we had some last year. It was really interesting. I'm sure we're getting it again. I'm not sure if it's in stock right now, but yeah, that was really interesting. There was that last year. Cat and dog away, it was an herb. So yeah, maybe something like that. Maybe trying something like that would be really interesting. And if you try it, tell me how it works. I'd be really curious to know. Okay, one more question. There's a helpful video on our channel about soil compaction. Yes. So yeah, we do have some really good videos about soil compaction, how to help restructure the soil if we have compaction issues. Something I want to talk about real quick before I kind of wrap this up is our next live stream. It'll be in 2 weeks from today. I forget what that date is off the top of my head. May something. I think it's maybe the 23rd. Okay. 21st, May 21st, we'll be doing another live stream, and that is all about soil health and Utah soils. So it's going to be all dirt, all things dirt. We're digging in.
It's all things soil.
Oh, soil. It's all things soil. We're going to be digging in. So if you do have some questions about your soil, feel free, please tune into that. Let me know if you have any questions. And I'm really excited about that one. I think I'm going to do a couple experiments on there to kind of show you some things you can do in your own garden to help figure out some things about your soil. So keep an eye out for that. I know we have it posted. So that is going to be, I think it's going to be really fun. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about is just some resources in our community, or just some different things you can do to maybe get some ideas. So I know in the Conservation Garden Park in West Jordan, it's right up the street from us. They have some really great like example gardens. It's really, I think, one of the best things to do if you are wanting to plant a pollinator garden is to get out and do some observation. Take a walk around, botanical gardens are great, Red Buttes great, conservation garden, even around your own neighborhood is really great. I really like to walk around the nursery, mainly because everything is labeled. So there's no question of hey, I really like this plant. The bees are all over it. But what is this plant? Now we need to identify it. Everything's identified. So it's right there. So I love walking around the nursery at different times of the season so I can see what is blooming, and then following those pollinators. What are they really going after right now in this part of the season? To me, I feel like that's one of the best ways to learn what is happening in the season right now. What do the pollinators like? And also, what do you like? I feel like the other big part of just design in general is, what are your goals? What do you like? Do you like certain colors? Do you like a certain style? Do you not like something? And the best way to figure that out is to just go walk around and see what calls to you. Or maybe you walk by something and you're like, there's something about that I don't like. And then you can remember that and incorporate that in whichever way you want. I always make it a point for like my favorite nurseries in the area or the botanical gardens is if I ever am like, I want something for this season. What is something for this season? It's my favorite thing to go walk around and look, see what is out, what's on display, what is blooming, what looks really pretty. I think that's just one of the best ways to kind of answer some of those questions for yourself. And I think it's really fun. Gives you an excuse to get out, go do a little plant walk. It's my favorite thing. Some other really good places for resources, the Utah Native Plant Society is really great for native plant info, identifying, maybe help figuring out where we can purchase some of these. The other thing about trying to source native plants for your garden is sometimes they are not in a lot of the cultivation and maybe the numbers that we're looking for. So the more that we as consumers try to look for these and ask around and push for it, hopefully the more that the growers will catch on and we can kind of help, find those in cultivation, make it more known that we're after more native plants. And yeah, great place to start is the Native Plant Society. They're a really great group. USU Extension is always really great resource for lists or questions. And then what I had mentioned earlier about keystone species, that is the National Wildlife Federation. So they have a really great list of keystone species that are listed by ecoregion. In Utah, we cover ecoregion 6 and 10. 6 is like forest and mountains. 10 is like that southwestern desert. So those are all some really, really great resources if you have more questions. And of course, our diagnostics team is also really great. Same with our info. If you have any questions, if you have some issues, anything you need to troubleshoot, they are always available, always willing to help. Really great resource as well. So that's what I've got for you guys today. Thank you so much for stopping by as we talk about pollinators and pollinator gardens. If you have any questions after this, you can always feel free to shoot us a message. And we are just looking forward to a great spring. And I had mentioned we're going to have our soil one next. So keep an eye out if you have questions about your soil. But all right, thank you guys so much for stopping in, and I'll see you later.